All right. Hi, everybody. It's our CFB Talk 176. It is Tuesday night. This is when we like to talk to you about whatever you want to talk about in college football. I'm Bobak Ha'Eri. I'm your regular host. There's so much that's happened since this last week, since we last talked. We actually had to have an emergency show, given what had happened at Alabama. So anyway, just firing it up, got the tweet out. If you'd like to join the conversation, just hit request in the bottom left. So many things to go over. Let's see here. The first thing I wanted to talk about, and the kind of the conversation of the day, it appears that someone has already leaked the arrival time of EA Sports College Football, the relaunch that has been very hyped up in some quarters of the college football sphere. It's been 10 years, over 10 years since we've had an NCAA football game. The last game was NCAA Football 14. For those who weren't around, just as a quick reminder, the year was always a year after the game came out. So NCAA Football 2014 came out actually in 2013, July. So maybe we'll get NCAA Football 2025, I guess is what it would be. But July 12th, it appears the leak came from Florida. I may have heard that they are hearing about some of these. The reason that date seems to be fairly reliable is there are rumors that some of these teams, especially those in the major conferences, were given early looks and kind of a heads up on what things are going to look like so they can give their tweaks to maybe how they want the game to look. So that's why that sudden leak out of Florida that the game is going to launch on July 12th. Might not be the exact date, but I guess it's coming. People are really excited about it. I'll be 100% honest. I'm a little skeptical. EA hasn't been necessarily the greatest with fans on some of these games. I'm old enough to remember EA on the Commodore 64 when they were like the cool, like rock star company. Their video games back in, gosh, I'm going to date myself, the mid 80s or early 80s actually looked like albums. They came in like the old record sleeves. And even though there was like a 5.25 disc inside, but anyway, I'm not going to nerd out too much out on that. But, some people are hoping for it. I'm just waiting for NIL microtransactions that are going to anger lots of people. So that way people can keep feeding the machine. Let's see here. John, what's going on? How are you?
Hey man, I swear I missed 1 week of this of our CFB talk, and I feel like I miss everything. I missed like two different talks within a week, and all the craziness of
Oh,
college
well,
football.
nothing's really happened. There was a championship game, and then we all just took a nap.
Yeah. No one retired or anything. Yeah, so it'd be crazy.
Yeah, it's what's fascinating is to think like we're not even done. I mean, we've now lost ever since Nick Saban retired. We've had 5 different programs lose their head coach for various reasons. Some of them have already been replaced, but I think what was most surprising was to lose 2 head coaches from G5 programs who've become coordinators now at Alabama because obviously Kalen DeBoer left Washington to join Alabama. Jed Fish left Arizona to take over Washington. Brent Brennan left San Jose State to take over Arizona. But now Kane Womack is now going to be the defensive coordinator at Alabama, vacating South Alabama, and then Buffalo's Maurice Lindquist is the next one to leave. So that's going to open up that MAC program as well. There's so many funny echoes to this because all of those programs now have 30-day windows for portal transfers again because once your head coach leaves, including Alabama, the moment Saban announced his retirement, suddenly the portal opens up. So we're going to kind of see these echoes continue on, particularly, I mean, and heck, we all know there's one, I'm going to say likely, not 100%. I could see the way it might not go that way, but we're still not even to Michigan, which everyone's expecting Harbaugh to leave Michigan. I was there at the post-game press conference in NRG Stadium, and he very much made it sound like he wanted to savor the moment, but he did not do anything to deny what everyone assumed he was going to do, regardless of how the season turned out, and that was try to return to the NFL. I want to go ahead and also let up Ray. He's been patient. If you'd like to join the conversation, go ahead and hit request. John, I know you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I actually did have 2 quick questions for you, real quick. First one, really easy question. Who do you think wins the national championship next year? I think you definitely predict that one. And part 2, a more fun question. For this new NCAA football game, if there's one feature you want to see in this game, what do you want to see and why?
Wow, that's a great question on the NCAA football game. I just like I want to see more of what makes each individual like stadium special. I mean, more than just because I mean, and maybe I I think my last edition was the first edition on the PS3. So it's been a while. I didn't see quite how the final few games went, but I just want to see because now the capacity of these systems is such, if I'm playing as USC, I want to hear more than just like the fight on song. I want to hear more of the songs. I want to see like kind of maybe the horse walking around the sideline. I just want to see the capacity, the capabilities of these systems kind of used to make it, so that if you're playing Texas A&M, you see the how the fans kind of sway in their certain way. You see the core cadets. I would just like to see more of that because I'm sure the core game engine. There's a lot they can do, and there's a lot I'm not gonna expect them to do a whole lot more than what's already out there. Because again, I'm not like a person who plays Madden all the time to know what the latest bells and whistles are for like the actual gameplay, but I would love to see more of what makes college football special. And the more they go into that, I think that would be great. Now, the other question, God, who's going to win? Who's going to win next season? Boy, oh boy. I mean, Texas has a really good look right now, especially keeping Queen Ewers, getting some of the transfers they have. I mean, they got Isaiah Bond from Alabama. That should step in for Xavier Worthy. They've got a good roster that's returning and momentum. Texas is back, but how can they now take it to the next level? And yeah, I know I'm going to get bitten by this one, but I'm pretty interested in seeing how Ohio State does, only because they've returned talent. They've got a good quarterback now from K State, Quentin Junkins from Mississippi, and they managed to keep Trayvon Richardson. So you're going to have an incredible running back tandem back there. Um, it I'm kind of going with those two. How about you, John?
Yeah, I'm gonna ride that risky train with you. I think Ohio State's my early pick right now, just because it seems like a lot of those players are coming back and buying in. They got a great transfer coming in at quarterback.
Do you need more napkins?
Yeah, yes, yeah. Sorry, I'm picking up wings right now just to finish work for the day. But but yeah, I think Ohio State. I think that's. I think just of all those factors, I think also it's a very pissed off Ohio State seeing their rival win the championship with all the things that have been going on. So I think for those factors, they got to be my favorite.
I'll give one doomsday scenario though for Ohio State. I will say because the schedule is overall fairly doesn't look too bad, especially their non-conference lineup is like Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall. But October 12th, they're going to Oregon, and Oregon's also a really strong team, and it's in Autzen. If they lose that game, then it'll be very entertaining to see what goes on in Columbus, because then you can only imagine the flack that's going to build up on Ryan Day. But we'll see. Ray, you've been super patient. What's going on?
Hey man, what's going on? It's been a long time since I hopped in one of these. It's good to see you're still doing them. I got two things. One kind of non-serious, one serious. The first one, the non-serious. I think someone had mentioned what NCAA feature you'd like to see. I think it would be awesome to see some cool rivalry aspects to the game in terms of outside the gameplay. So like, if you're Tennessee and you get three unsportsmanlike conducts at Alabama, you start seeing some golf balls and bottles of mustard thrown onto the field. Or if you're a ranked rival and you lose on the road, you don't get to quit out of the game. You have to watch the opposing fans storm the field. I think
Oh,
that
I
would be
love
fun.
that.
Yeah,
Field storming would be great. I have a feeling. I wonder how much pressure they get for that, but to not include it, considering a lot of fussier folks are not necessarily fans of it. But that would be a delight. You know,
yeah.
oh my gosh! And the mustard thing is really funny, or just like stuff raining on the field in general.
Yeah,
Get the
trash and
occasional,
whatnot.
like what was it? The like Texas Tech, the
Oh, the tortillas.
well, not the oh yeah, the tortillas. But I'm sorry, I was also thinking of oh my god, the animal that ran on the field. I totally forgot what it was.
Oh, the cat,
Yeah, and
right?
possum.
Oh,
One
the
of them had a
possum,
possum.
the
Yeah,
possum.
like have
Yeah,
a possum run on the field. Like we need moments like that. The silly stuff that makes college football. Like don't have it like wreck the game, but Or,
Yeah.
and again, like some of these other things where we've talked about where teams just mysteriously power up because against certain teams, they just suddenly, like one game a season, a particular team just goes completely crazy. Like the Purdue train power up, like one game against a ranked opponent, Purdue just suddenly wakes up and goes into like beast mode or something like that. But
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. That would be
Um,
great.
yeah, and that second point being, we talk a lot about these Power Five coaches departing, especially like Washington and Bama and whatnot. But I'm interested to see if anybody has any thoughts on the San Jose State job. One just random alignment I thought in my head was Jason Candle from Toledo. Seems like that could be a good G5 to G5. I know he's been there forever and probably pretty committed, but I'm thinking they're deserving of that caliber considering their recruiting pool in California and some of the resources that institution is pouring into the school.
Yeah, absolutely. Candle's one of those guys you're always surprised doesn't seem to get as much traction because he always comes up as a candidate, no matter what the position is. I'm wondering though, and here's an interesting thing. I mean, not that many years ago, but around, it was like 2017 or 2018. I was sitting down at Mountain West Media Day, and it wasn't the San Jose State coach. And I think it was still, yeah, I think it was Brent Brennan really early on in his career. Like it was his first year there. So, but it wasn't him. It was actually, I'm trying to remember. It was a former coach who I'm not sure if he had coached there, but had coached at Stanford, which of course shares the same footprint. And the conversation went to the fact of how hard it is at San Jose State because it's so expensive to live in the Bay Area, particularly around San Jose, because they're right where Silicon Valley is. So prices for everything, especially housing, are really high. So you don't necessarily have Stanford's budget. And Stanford did something really unique. Stanford had this one wealthy alumnus basically build, from what I've been told, like a townhouse complex where it's designed for coaches and staff to be able to afford to live in the area. So it gives them an opportunity to have that so their families can develop. At San Jose State, I remember they were talking about how for a while there, so many of their coordinators were like former head coaches, like guys who were sort of in their twilight of their career because they didn't have kids, they didn't really care about living in a big place, they just wanted to still coach, and that's always been kind of a struggle for San Jose State because the school doesn't have the kind of budget to pay its coordinators enough for what might be a competitive wage in the Bay Area, which is it's amazing to think that, but that's been one of their tough problems. Now, in terms of who might follow them up, that might make someone like Kansas a little bit more concerned versus like I'm not saying like the cost of living in a place like Boise State much more reasonable or Nevada or even UNLV. I think I wouldn't be surprised if they go after also a coordinator from the region. I mean, some of the names have been tossed around are your usual suspects, like UNLV's offensive coordinator Brennan Marion, who's been up for several jobs. Oddly enough, Brian Harson's been brought up, because he's still out there and available. I mean, he's happily probably collecting some money from Auburn on the regular, but I'm sure he keeps coming up as a potential coach. But I wouldn't be surprised if we get someone with West Coast West Coast ties who's willing to take that on because it's always been such a tough job. I mean, anyone who is less familiar with the job might be surprised that Arizona wanted to hire him after going like 7-6 for a couple of years, but that is a triumph at San Jose State. And that COVID year, they had another heck of a year. They could get good guys, but it's just so hard, given how tough it is to spend in that area. And it's San Jose State. I mean, they are the original, for those who want historical context, they're the original Cal State University. The first Cal State University was San Jose State. And they're not a UC and they don't have the same budget as a UC. And that, again, makes things complicated. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see that. And I'm very curious to see who they hire. And likewise, I'm curious to see who South Alabama and Buffalo end up with. I haven't really paid attention to who the candidates are for those two. I mean, Buffalo literally just opened up because Alabama just poached him. So really interesting stuff. I mean, we were talking about this, by the way, just a few weeks ago and this is where a story leaked way ahead of anyone wanting it to. So the university was forced to say something, but North Dakota State, their head coach, ends up announcing during the playoff run when they're heading into a semifinal game that, after the season, he's going to be joining USC as a linebacker coach. And that one seemed pretty astonishing. I mean, it's not unusual for a head coach to take a demotion to kind of move up. Kalen DeBoer is actually a great example of that. The guy wins 3 national championships at NAIA at Sioux Falls, which some people call Sioux Falls University. It's actually University of Sioux Falls. I've actually visited the campus. But anyway, and then he goes and becomes a coordinator at the FCS level, and then works his way up to becoming obviously now the Alabama head coach. But it's been rare to see. I mean, last year I remember people were noticing when Sean Lewis left Kent State to join Dion over at Colorado. But now to see, again, a couple of guys from G5 programs get poached to join, it kind of underlines how much not only the potential for an upward trajectory in a career, but also the pay for some of the coordinators. People have said that, people were surprised that, USC would pay more than the North Dakota State head job, but they probably were. Some people were crunching numbers, and some of the coordinators were getting far more than that. And even if it was not the same level as obviously the offensive or defensive coordinator, USC could probably come pretty close to what North Dakota State was paying, although, of course, the money wouldn't go quite as far in Los Angeles. Let's see here. I see Thak, you're also wanting to come up. I want to let you up here as well. Again, this is our CFB Talk 176. It's off season, but a lot of stuff going on. Always happy to talk about whatever it is y'all want to talk about. I mean, Ross Bjork, apparently Ohio State got him. I was just reading that earlier today. I know that was a rumor, but Texas A&M fans seem pretty okay with that, which doesn't always feel good for the team or for the program that's hiring him. But we'll see what kind of buyout Ross Bjork ends up paying at Ohio State. Thak, what's going on?
Man, hey, what's up? I know you guys were talking about throwing it on the field, and I do want to say we'll give a shout out to the XFL here, the best example actually of throwing it on the field. I don't know, the Tennessee Golf Balls and Mustard might got it beat, but at the DC Defenders game this past spring in the XFL, they were selling like these discounted something lemon tequila, lemon something with rocks tequila in it, and the DC somehow the refs blew the game. I can't recall, but they were taking these lemons that were put in these tequila drinks and throwing it. I mean, the field was littered with lemons, and they've taken that up as their mascot. So if you want to go see some fun shit about throwing some stuff on the field, we'll do that. Man. A lot of interesting coaching moves here obviously, I don't know if this last talk, I guess Kalen DeBoer was not hired at that point. Man, I don't know. Kind of Brian Harsin never made it to a national championship game. I'll give him that. But, man, it's Alabama. They're a tough crowd to please. I'm just waiting until the books open up with some lines on how soon the boosters are going to start making up rumors about Kalen DeBoer having an affair with a staffer or something because he's, quote, not a culture fit. That'll be an interesting hire. We'll have to see how it works out. He spent some time up in the West Coast there, and so did Harsin. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. Lots of coordinator moves going on. Notably, Mizzou still not hired a defensive coordinator at this point. I think they'll probably promote inside. There was actually a little known fact there. Blake Baker from Mizzou departed to Louisiana State and to follow Brian Harsin there. But DJ Smith actually served as the co-defensive coordinator last year. So my assumption is he was the linebackers coach. My assumption is he's probably going to get promoted inside if they still have not found a defensive coordinator. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on all these crazy coaching moves?
It's interesting you mention it because the whole Kalen DeBoer moves, I was a little surprised by it because I thought, the man has no connection to the South. And given what happened at Auburn, I'm like, man, I would be surprised if they weren't wary of that. But then I thought about the fact Nick Saban actually did try to hire Ryan Grubb last offseason, and Grubb stayed at Washington. So I would love to know, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it, how much Saban's suggestion had to do with also what made Kalen DeBoer an attractive choice. I've been listening to some analysis and reading some about the fact that, was Saban's coaching tree so successful that it's just hard to get anyone else? I mean,
Yeah, and
like
that's the crazy thing is that I think they went outside the coaching tree. Obviously, Saban must have had some sort of opinion, or at least his voice was heard. You would assume so. But the most surprising thing is they went outside his coaching
yeah.
tree, and you're right. It's you start looking at the more successful guys. Obviously, there's some unsuccessful guys in that coaching tree, but you start looking at the more successful guys that are still in college, and a lot of them are committed to head coaching positions at schools with upward trajectories that quite frankly it's not as a lucrative. Alabama's not as lucrative an offer.
Yeah, and I mean, like Kirby Smart is now arguably the best coach currently coaching. I mean, without a doubt, and he's
Right.
not going to leave there.
No, Sarkisian's not going to leave.
Yeah, Texas is always going to be able to. Getting in Texas into a bidding war for a winning coach, you're not going to win.
Right.
I don't care who you are. I mean,
there's just more in number of boosters in Austin than there is in Alabama. I mean,
one thing I heard that was fascinating. Apparently, Alabama's collective has increased in size by over 1,000 of donors, because they're now having to take it seriously, because there were so many people who are willing to play for less money than they would because they were playing for Saban. Right. And now Kalen DeBoer's there. And now I do wonder again. I think the fact that Kalen DeBoer was able to bring Ryan Grubb, and that was something that was very attractive to Saban last offseason, which for reasons that are quite obvious now. But I think his willingness to hire, again, the way he's hiring. I mean, he's now poached 2 different head coaches away in the last couple of days. He's willing to kind of bring people in, I think, to sort of build folks who can make up for his weak spots. And maybe that's it. I mean, because that's what made Saban so good, his ability to find talent. Although his recruiting acumen really cannot be understated. I mean, that's...
And that's the thing is the even just if football in general is just in the head coach role, and do the more successful head coaches are CEOs. They're not they have a very deep knowledge, but I mean, you're talking about almost 100 guys on a team you're trying to manage, and you have to rely on good coordinators to do a ton of the day-to-day. I mean, you think of like Kirk Ferentz, that's probably the best, in my opinion, CEO style head coach. He's not. I've got a couple buddies on that Iowa team, and they don't see Kirk Ferentz. They see him very rarely. They're their day-to-day is with their position coach, and if they're on offense, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. So I think he could be very successful in that role. And a lot of coaches are trying to sort of Drinkwitz. He was calling the plays last year, and then he finally gave up, decided to bring in an offensive coordinator, and they've certainly had a lot more success with him not calling the plays. Because you think about it, there's so much, just a immeasurable amount of stuff you got to do to manage, God knows how many staff, plus, over 100 kids.
Absolutely. And with DeBoer, though, it's also interesting, too. I was also thinking, if I was DeBoer, not only would I take the role, because either you succeed and people are impressed enough. I mean, I'm not sure what it's going to take to... I mean, I think Alabama fans have somewhat realistic expectations to be modestly disappointed. They'll take modest disappointment. Going to the playoff is still an expectation, particularly in the 12-team playoff. But even if you flame out, I mean, that's a good retirement gig. Like, okay, I didn't make it. I got to collect this paycheck for a number of years and probably get a decent buyout, and then just go relax and, I don't know, wherever he wants to live. I don't know if he necessarily wants to move back to his small town in South Dakota, but, live in the Riviera.
Special. This is the Jimbo special. I mean, you think ideally he would think that I mean, it's a tough job. It's anybody following obviously Nick Saban is going to have to, and I think that was a negative for allegedly some of the other coaches they were looking at is the expectations, the athletic director expectations, that office's expectations, schools' expectations, boosters' expectations, or playoffs or bust. And following that, your seat is is already a little warm. I think they'll have reasonable expectations for at least the first 2 years. But you're looking at we want to be in the playoffs after that, and that's certainly going to be a difficult move. But
yeah, I'm gonna geek out for just 1 second and admit that, like, when I was covering the national championship, I went to media day. I always take pictures of everybody who's there, just because it's I like to I always have since I was a kid. And then I realized, Kalen DeBoer doesn't have a photo on Wikipedia. I'll just upload mine. And I was laughing because suddenly it became the only free photo of Kalen DeBoer out on the internet, and because I just released it to whatever. Man, that was not something you kind of expect when you throw something up there, but that's always been a. Because what am I going to do with all those photos? I take photos everywhere I go. I have photos, like anytime I go to media day, I take a photo of all the players there and maybe tweet the good ones. Then I'm stuck with all these photos on my phone. It's not like my kids care. So
I always forget you're a big Wikipedia guy.
Okay, I don't edit it anymore. I used to edit, like that was like a thing I did like around 2000 old, so 2007 to like 2010. That was like something I like to do, and then kind of shifted away from that. But I still kind of like to upload photos because, again, it's like, what else are you going to do with your photo? Then they end up in the randomest place. My Google results get really screwy because, like, my name, they have to use my name, and then it just like I'll appear on a random website because somebody included a photo and then included my name with the photo. But and then I'll occasionally get sent like books, because people will use the photo in a book and they don't want it. They feel bad that they're not paying me, so they'll just send me a copy of a book. So
what's the weirdest book you gotten?
Oh gosh, it was actually a funny one. It was like a group of the world's weirdest sports. And the reason it was, I went to Oaxaca like in 2005 and took a photo of a Mesoamerican ball court in a Zapotec ruin. And the photo turned out great, even though my camera, this is like 2005, my camera was not very high res. But they just ran with it. So I got all these Penguin copies. This is tiny little paperback, but whatever. My kids like the book. I could say, hey, Dad took that one photo. But
funny. I appreciate you, Bobak. Have a good one, y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Elizabeth, what's going on?
Hey, Bobak. Just wanted to touch base on a couple of things. One thing, fantastic coverage of the national championship. Really appreciated all your effort on that. Photos, wonderful.
Thanks.
Love to see that. And then secondly, I wanted to touch upon, the players now that are getting paid. I'm hearing this from multiple teams where they're getting paid. Maybe some guy has $200,000 in the bank, and now he doesn't want to make the effort on the field. So I don't know if this is good or bad, but wouldn't it seem to me that, if you're getting paid $200,000 to do, 75%, wouldn't you get paid a lot more if you had 100% effort? I don't get that uninspired play or motivation for money, because it is a business and it's entertainment, but they're making money.
I'll just say this much. Even before, above board financial inducements, I think, I was always a fan of going back and looking at retrospective, the worst recruiting flops. I remember there was one guy at USC, Whitney Lewis. He was ranked higher than Reggie Bush and all these other guys.
I don't remember him. I mean,
there's a reason why. There's a very good reason why you don't remember him.
Okay.
And then he transferred out, and I forgot what school he ended up with. But all the back in the day when your only info was like a random team forum, that was like everyone's like, yeah, he got fat. Like everyone's like, he was a wide receiver and he got fat. Probably became a tight end or something. Yeah. So he not that I'm not a good tight end. Back in the day before tight ends were more used, I always joked tight end was where a quarterback went to die, on a roster.
Right.
But but he just didn't pan out. So there's always going to be guys like that. I think the money is certainly inducement of where they go. But I think another factor that's kind of playing into this is we're still in such a Wild West situation. We've never had, we're still young. The NIL market is maturing in front of us. So we've seen that more. I've heard some more of these deals tend to be like incentivized, it totals out to X number of dollars over a period of years. So I think we'll see a little bit more of that, so that if you get a player who's maybe not delivering, you may not renew it the next year, which could cause them to leave and get really angry and maybe transfer to a team where they suddenly want to prove themselves. But, they weren't doing it at your program. But it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see. I mean, some of the stuff that people want to do, I'm a little more questionable about. Like I've heard, I think it was Ari Wasserman wrote an article where he was suggesting players should be forbidden from following their coach somewhere, which I thought was just
That's
completely asinine.
bizarre.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
bizarre.
like
What?
if your head coach is leaving and you like him and they like you and they want you to keep playing for him, I mean,
And
follow him.
yeah, and you committed to them and you're devoted to that coach for a reason. So that
I mean,
makes sense.
the whole point of the transfer portal in NIL is because, especially the transfer portals, because the head coaches were allowed to do this. So, I mean, because it is crazy to think back, there used to be that period of time where if you wanted to transfer, you gave your coach a list of teams, and then he said, no, you're not going to this one. You're not going. Usually, the
Oh yeah,
in-conference programs, and
exactly. Especially
now,
in the SEC, they did that where you can't transfer to an SEC program.
yeah, now suddenly they're allowed to do what they want, and I mean, it's a two-edged sword. I absolutely agree. There's, I look at it as there's bad to it. There's going to be negative to it, but I think the benefits overall for just the players and all that, I feel sympathy enough. I think at this point that let them have it. They're one bad injury away from never really kind of making it and necessarily getting what might have been a lucrative career. So let them get it now. Let them find where they can get it. And then you get guys that, again, I was still surprised when Miller Moss showed up at the Holiday Bowl. Suddenly you get some guy who's been sitting behind and just scores 6 touchdowns. And now, of course, he's got the UNLV quarterback who's going to be competing against him for the starting position. But I mean, every now and again you get those. So there's still a mix of guys who stick around. I mean, going back to what just happened last week, Michigan's program is mostly guys they developed inside that program. I don't know
Right.
if that's going to keep happening, especially if Harbaugh leaves. I'm not
Well,
sure.
yeah, exactly. If he goes to LA or not.
Exactly. I mean, I'll be curious. I mean, I think they're going to probably hire internally. I wouldn't be surprised if Sharon Moore ends up being the next head coach at Michigan if Harbaugh leaves, which is still an if. But at the same time, I mean, it's going to be rare for programs, I think, to have that many players coming from within. It just seems that way, especially in the playoff era that we're entering and with the portal. But yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, I don't. That was kind of a meandering rant to say that I don't
Yeah,
think
no
that the
worries.
players.
I was just curious on what your thoughts were because I'm seeing so many comments from different teams and even my Arkansas Razorbacks where, you know, the guy and again one of our running backs who's no longer with the program, gained a lot of weight and now can't run as well, but he has $200,000 in the bank. So now is he not inspired to run as well? Is he not, I mean, does that make I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I
I
mean, they
don't
were
know
like
whether
that.
this is,
All I'll say is they were like that before. There were players like that before money was even in the factor. They were just
yeah,
like,
you're right.
you
You're
get
absolutely right.
you're kind of they're just busts, and you're kind of like, man, you had such potential. Why did you? So even before the money, now you're dragging some above board boosters with you as
Right.
well, which hopefully will get them to learn a little bit more. I'm curious to see though. Maybe there's a way to structure a deal to make it so it's a little less
And then,
like you just feel like you handed a guy a ton of money and they kind of didn't
yeah,
make it.
I think it should be incentive based, performance based, so
I
you do X amount, and then if you get this, you get more. So
I
you're,
don't know if they can straight up go entirely performance based. I think there may be some restrictions on that, but
oh,
you
okay.
could maybe put benchmarks on just the amount of time there. And I think we were starting to hear there have been some like that where it's like when that whole Jalen Rashada story was coming out and they were like, did they just hand him, remember when Miami was supposed to handing all that money? Turns out it was actually like it was being handed over a period of time. Like there were dates. Like I know they can do that, but I think I worry a little bit about,
Con,
especially when we start paying players for
con,
touchdowns, tackles. That could get
kind of like
complicated.
I'm just thinking, yeah, I'm thinking more like phased, just per season,
Yeah.
something not so yeah, per yard, per gain, all that good stuff, touchdowns. So yeah, I don't know. I was wondering, but I think you're right about, it's kind of like if they weren't motivated to do well and be to the next level, they're not going to do it.
Absolutely. I always tell people, like, well,
Just like in work.
yeah, no, I teach at the undergraduate level, and I've taught at the law school level, and I always tell students, like, look, I use a football analogy. I'm like, you can be super talented in high school, and then when you get to college, some people naturally have it, and some people have to work hard at it, and sometimes it's those kids that work really hard that get those A's and get in let's say a graduate school like law school. And then when you get
Right.
to law school, very few people go to law school and have that natural talent, just ace classes. I'm going to say that that's like a 1 in a 200 kind of
Yeah, that
number
makes
type.
sense.
And
Exactly.
then, most of those guys got to work hard. And, you can make that analogy with football. It's like, high schooler, you're a best high schooler, your natural talent, go to college. Some of those guys are such a insane natural talent that they can maybe scoot by in college, but a lot of those guys still got to work. And then, you can't sometimes you can't just coast. And some of those guys just don't got it.
Yeah, and bottom line, some people don't want to work for it. Period. They don't want to
Yep.
work hard. So, yeah, I get it.
Absolutely. Hey, John, you came back up. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I was just going to say to Elizabeth's point about that player in Arkansas getting fat. I it could be for the money. It could also be it's the cooking's down, so good down south, man. It's harder to fight the temptation of good southern food. So I can't blame them. I can't blame them if that's the case. but the other thing I was going to mention too, I think Thack was talking about killing the boar. Have you ever seen a coach with such a rise in the coaching ranks? I mean, I don't know how aware people are, but he was a Division II head coach 15 years ago, and in a 15-year span, he has jumped from Division II to I would say that one of the highest pinnacles of coaching. I mean, that in itself is phenomenal, and it's harder for me to remember a time where a head coach has really just jumped so rapidly up the ranks.
Oh, absolutely. He earned his spot, and it was an analog to, I want to say it was an analog to D2. It was NAIA, but yeah, no. I mean, he climbed up from the at the time it was NAIA. They moved to D2. A lot of those teams kind of scooched around in the last several years. So, but yeah, absolutely. No, his rise is absolutely something else. And again, as we were talking about, particularly with the fact that Alabama has now poached two G5 head coaches to be assistants. He did that exact route. He went from, after winning those championships at Sioux Falls, he went to FCS and then became a coordinator at Eastern Michigan and then a coordinator at Fresno State, a coordinator at Indiana, and then finally got his FBS head coaching opportunity. It's striking, and sometimes, and I think that's one of the positives you can say if you're looking for why Alabama went that way, is that he's a winner, he knows how to win, and his record as a coach is absolutely astonishing. I mean, the worst season he had was that kind of off COVID year where he went 3-3. But other than that, if you take that out, it's even more of an incredible run by him. Let's see here, Max Romeo. What's going on?
Hey, Red, love your account, man. I just had two questions for you. One about Penn State, because I'm a student there, and then one about the Big Ten in general. So one of the main criticisms about Penn State is that, and James Franklin too, is that we can never win the big game. We got bodied by Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl, lose to Michigan and Ohio State every year. So I'm wondering, what do you think that James Franklin and Penn State in general need to do to finally win one of those big games? Like, is it recruiting? Is it play calling? Like, what do you think that we need to do to finally win one of those big games?
That's a great question, because James Franklin's one of those great enigmas right now, because I'm against the idea of like letting him go, only because so many teams think that, oh, we're not quite making it, and they let a guy go, and then you end up like the kind of the long descent that Nebraska has, which I'm optimistic they can get out of it, but the whole decision to fire Solich, I remember when they fired Frank Solich after going, after having some great seasons, but not quite reaching that pinnacle again. And then, they found out it can get quite worse. So that said, last season with Penn State, the offense was just such a trouble. Their defense was phenomenal. And granted, I'm kind of the thought that the bowl games are unreliable indicators, particularly when you're not in the playoffs. So yeah, Ole Miss did a great job, but I'm willing to say, well, we'll see how Penn State does when they know they're playing for it all, especially going into next season. I'm curious to see how Andy does as their offensive coordinator. I'm always bad with last names. I'm kind of a little hesitant. They got a new defensive coordinator. I'm a little more optimistic about that because of the way they've recruited there. Sometimes with a quarterback like Drew Aller, when they're really highly touted and they don't quite pan out. I've seen that happen, and sometimes a change in who is coaching them does make a huge difference. I mean, again, I hate to use USC analogies, but because I continually tend to use them, but I still remember when Carson Palmer seemed like not a bust, but kind of a disappointing quarterback for as good as he was supposed to be. And then finally, I believe it was his third offensive coordinator, ended up being Norm Chow, and then unlocked his potential. And suddenly, poof, you're like, wow, where did this guy come from? Or anytime you get a transfer quarterback, I mean, look at the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. He was certainly Arizona State wasn't exactly weeping when he left, and suddenly you get him to LSU, get someone good system, good coach, and suddenly they take off. So those things do happen. So with Penn State, I think first of all, I think Michigan's going to take a step back. I don't think it's unusual to think Michigan's going to take a step back. So much of this team is built around this one season. It's rare you get the way things turned out for a team, the way they turned out for Michigan at the end of this season. I'm going to set aside the Connor Stallion stuff. I mean, they were always talking about like, oh, this going into this season, these guys are all seniors. They're all, it's going to be a very mature team. This is going to be it. If Harbaugh can't do it this year, he can never do it. But then the idea was it was going to be a drop off because a lot of those guys are now leaving. I mean, I've heard estimations that they might even set a record for the number of first round draft picks or something like that. But all of that said, I mean, they're gonna be a weaker program. So Penn State will have an even better opportunity to at least perhaps climb into that spot with towards the top of the Big Ten. With the Big Ten dropping divisions, it's kind of interesting. Their schedule is definitely. Let's see, they're going to be playing UCLA and at USC. They got Ohio State, and they don't get Washington. Pardon me, they don't get Michigan, so we'll just set that one aside altogether. There's some tough games there. They got Washington, but Washington's a mystery right now, honestly, with the way they're going to be with the new head coach and obviously losing a couple of key players. They have a shot. I mean, at this point, they should be a playoff team, right? You think that if they can maintain what they had going, they can get into the playoff consistently and perhaps match up against teams that they can knock off and perhaps climb back up. I'm not sure where to place them right now. I'm not sure where to put I think they should certainly have a shot at getting into the 12-team playoff next season, but I'm a little hesitant to put any rankings right now. I'd like to see where people develop. I like to see how the spring game, kind of the feedback. I don't necessarily watch spring games, but I like reading how teams seem to be kind of ranking up against each other in some of these things. But of course, how many people eat that and then get burned.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I do feel bad, like you said. You mentioned the defense. I feel like we wasted a big opportunity with that. One of the best defenses in recent memory for sure, and the offense just couldn't get it together.
Yeah, we should get that offense and marry it with that defense and marry it with the LSU offense, and we'd have something unstoppable.
Oh, 100%. And then the second question is, it's funny you mentioned USC. So my other question was, how do you think the new Pac-12 teams are going to fare in the Big Ten? So Big Ten, we love our defense. We love our punts, as Iowa showed all year. And then I feel like one of the stereotypes for the Pac-12 is not a lot of defense, ton of offense going on. So I'm just wondering how you think how those West Coast offenses are going to fare against the Big Ten defenses. Do you think they're just going to kind of cancel each other out? Do you think one's going to have an advantage over the other? Love to hear your thoughts on that.
I am very curious to see how that pans out because I think Washington's now a little bit more of a quirky one only because they lost so many people at this point. Oregon's going to be ready and geared up to play because they already played a little more physically than most of the other Pac-12 teams. I think they're going to be ones that are going to race in and I think be a little overlooked because people tend to look at the LA schools, especially USC, which, they seem to be taking their defense seriously, at least in terms of who they've been hiring because holy cow, they went from Alex Grinch to, they just hired, a line coach from the NFL. I think it was the Rams or the Chargers. I can't remember. It's one of the LA teams, but they're loading up on that. I don't know if USC is necessarily going to be ready to play at the level they were. Well, it can't get that much worse than last season, but I'm not sure if USC is quite ready. But in terms of the cultural kind of mix, I'm curious to see. I don't think the West Coast schools are going to start adapting like a Big Ten West style. Like I just don't think that's going to influence them at all. But I do wonder if that we're going to see perhaps shakeup, because I mean that was probably a little bit of the issue with the Big Ten West, is that all those teams were kind of aimed at kind of playing each other in their own style of football, and then they just were kind of hapless when they would get outside of it. Up until this season, the argument was Michigan was just built to beat Ohio State, and when they get into the playoff, they'd croak. Obviously, this season that didn't end up being that way, but I think it'll be interesting. I don't know. As a person who likes more of an offensive type of sport, I would like to see them rather pull some of the Big Ten West teams into being a little more aggressive on offense, but I'm not sure. It would be fascinating if the teams stayed kind of where they were, so that we do get a conference like the Big Ten that has such variation in the style of play. But I realistically don't know how that'll work. And there's so many factors. We've never had a conference quite like this. And we're going to see some very interesting results that are hard to predict. And maybe that's it. I mean, we're in such a period of time where nothing is easy to predict. The portal's still kind of young. We're still not entirely sure how the portal really is best used. I mean, because last year, gosh knows, Dion and GJ Kinney really kind of took it to the extreme level. We're not sure entirely how NIL works. We're just talking about how do you budget money to make it work right. Now, even a school like Alabama is taking the portal a whole lot more seriously, because you don't have the Saban bump where players are willing to necessarily play for less openly given money than to have that opportunity to play for Saban. There's so much mystery out there, and these new conferences, but particularly the Big Ten, and to a lesser degree the fact that we have Stanford and Cal going to the ACC. It's a mysterious time, which is a fun time, because we're going away from the predictability. It's no longer like, well, it's going to be Clemson, it's going to be Alabama in the national championship game, and the rest of everyone is just kind of playing for entertainment value. Like, it is completely Wild West in the terms of predictions, and I'm glad. I'm really glad, because it was getting a little stale there. I still like the sport, but we needed this. We needed this kick in the pants. Let's see here. I want to let up Colin as well. And as Colin's connecting, Max, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, no. I was just going to say, thanks for your thoughts, man. Appreciate you talking.
No, man. Thanks for joining us. Colin, what's on your mind?
What's going on, Reddit? Just a bit of context. Sam Houston, Bearcat over here. Eat 'em up cats. Obviously, we all know how we trended for the majority of the season for not winning any games for a while.
But having a great defense while doing it, like, that was the frustrating part.
Yeah, it was very, very. It was very. I mean, I went to all their games. I traveled with the team for broadcasting reasons, and I got to see every single game unfold in front of me, and it was quite an experience, to say the least. Being the new kid on the block in FBS Conference USA and whatsoever. I mean, did the season end like it did? Of course, but I kind of think I take it as a process. Like, it's just a stepping stone to what this program can be in the future. Whatever happens with NIL, whatever happens with conference alignment or NCAA sanctions or whatever could happen, it's just a step in the process, in my opinion. And I hope people, especially my fellow Bearcats, recognize that, because we had, in my opinion, we had a good transfer class, or a good early signing day rather, last month, a month ago. But I want to know what your thoughts are on the program and where it could potentially go in the future.
Yeah, I think for those who are unfamiliar with how that season went, Sam Houston State opened with just kind of frustration, because they I remember they lost to BYU 14-0. Not a bad loss for your first true FBS season, your opening game. Again, lost close to what was thought to be a very good Air Force team. Now, they obviously didn't quite end up being as strong. They lost, 13-3. They kind of had a couple of other losses, but then they lost in OT to Jacksonville State, which had also moved up. They lost to FIU in double OT. They kept losing. The games were getting closer, and then they've won, finally, 3 of their last 4 games to finish 3-9. So they look better as they went along. And like what James Madison did when they moved up a couple of seasons ago, they opened with a full FBS schedule. They didn't give themselves. I mean, Kennesaw State, was FCS when they played, and that was also another close win. And to be sure, Kennesaw State is also moving up next season to join FBS and join Conference USA. I believe it's next season they're joining.
Yes, it is next season. They do.
So I mean, again, it was a strong schedule, and it was tough, and there were close losses, but they trended up. And I'm not sure. I mean, I admit I'm not necessarily familiar with how many folks are returning on the Bearcats roster, but you've got Casey Keeler, who's a great head coach. I mean, he's won a national championship there. And I mean, in that wild COVID season. And he's actually won. I forgot he won at Delaware. Oh my God. Totally forgot he won that Delaware. I remember that Delaware season. So I mean, he can win. He's been a good coach. It's just it was a tough start, a tough transition. I'd be curious to see next season. I haven't seen what the schedule looks like, but how many folks, how much have they retained from this roster?
So we've actually retained quite a lot. We haven't had a lot of our guys into the portal. We have a couple of guys that are declaring for the draft, but in my opinion, not really ones to bat my eye about because of their positions and what we have. Keegan Shoemaker, our QB1, is graduating, or he graduated already. I don't know if he's graduated this spring semester, or if he graduated already. Not too sure, but in the transfer portal, we got Jace Bauer from Central Michigan. We got Hunter Watson from Iowa Western Community College, who just won a national championship. And then we got Michael Phoenix from Kilgore College, who was one of the best wide receivers in JUCO. We lost Akeem Meatball Smith on the defensive line, but we picked up a D lineman from SMU, Dylan Frazier. I mean, for what we lost, we pretty much filled up and kind of reloaded a little bit. But I think a lot of these guys that are still with us, and you can't obviously forget our middle linebacker Trevor Williams, who was one of the best in the country. He's gonna be missed, but he's going on to the draft and probably is going to get picked. We don't know that for sure, but at the end of the day, I think we're fine roster wise. I am curious to see who we replace our defensive coordinator with, because he went to New Mexico State. So, but at the end of the day, I think we're going to be fine. If you are curious about the schedule, we open on August 31st at Rice.
I just saw that. Yeah, you guys have Rice at UCF. Wise coming to town. And then you got, I forgot the Texas State game. That's going to be a new rivalry at NRG, isn't it?
I mean, that was a rivalry back in the old Southland days before Texas State went to the Sun Belt. So it's kind of basically a revival of that.
That's great.
Yeah,
NRG is an awesome stadium. I was really cool. I'd never been to Houston before, and being in there, that was a great facility. And I know they played a game. That the Air Force game was there this last season, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, that Air Force. It was the Armed Forces game. The school partnered with the Operation Red Wings Foundation, so it was a pretty good game in all intents and purposes. I mean, our defense played their butts off. I mean, holding Air Force under 300 total yards is a very hard thing to do, and I'm glad our guys, they played their hardest. I mean, the record doesn't show it, but I am excited as not just a fan but a student, to see where they go.
One quick question for you: are they planning to expand Bauer Stadium? Because I know it came up, I think, in one of the Trivia Tuesdays that one of the guys puts together for our CFB, that it is now I think it is the smallest FBS stadium right now. It's like 14,000.
I believe so. Yes. I'm sure there's probably a FBS stadium I don't know about that is smaller, but as far as I've heard and know, yes. And to answer your question, yes, there are plans to expand it, which means new press box, there's apparently, if you ever are curious, I mean, there was a 10-year plan that came out over the summer for the university that talks about it. It also talks about adding an indoor practice facility that is outside of the football stadium. So, I mean, it's a 10-year plan, so obviously things can change. So, no construction going on yet, football wise. Just gonna see what happens. See if
I still remember, because when I was in Houston, I stayed an extra day and walked the Rice campus and walked in that stadium, and It's amazing to think it hosted a Super Bowl at one point. That stadium also needed a lot of updates because they'd removed a bunch of seats, and I knew that because it used to be in it was the Rice Stadium was built in an awkward time right before the NFL took off, so they overbuilt the stadium as it turned out because then people were going to go see at the time Houston Oilers games. Rice had just built this huge stadium, but yeah, walking around that was a striking one because their concourse level is Spartan, to put it mildly. But man, thanks for joining us. It's great to talk that. It's always great to talk about a program we don't always do. And Sam Houston, I'm genuinely interested to see how they do next season because during that losing streak, it was such a frustrating streak because it wasn't that the team was playing poorly. It's just that things just kept falling short, and the defense seemed to be pulling its weight for that time.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I really appreciate you, especially giving, Sam Houston such a spotlight. Obviously we had the advantage which we have never had as a program, was to play those midweek games where we can be put on national TV. Like, I mean, we played one game. That BYU game was on FS1. The Air Force game was CBS Sports Network. I believe it was the Jacksonville State game that was on ESPN2, and in a couple of other. And we had one on ESPNU, and we had a couple more on the CBS Sports Network. And so, just having that there for us, and then having accounts, especially you, talk about us getting the brand out there, and just bringing some recognition. It's just I can tell you that me and a lot of other Bearcats I know, we really appreciate that.
Oh man, I appreciate that. We just love college football. Maybe one day we'll have somebody from Japan call in and try to tell us how awesome it is that we covered their team too. But I love Sam Houston. I love the fact that I love when teams move up. It's such an exciting thing. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that season goes. I want to just acknowledge the Water Boy posted a little while ago in the chat for this particular talk that Ian Rappaport noted that it's not just the Chargers, the Falcons have also interviewed Jim Harbaugh for their head coach position. I am one of the thought that he is definitely going to take one of those. Let's see here. I've got Elliot Burner. Hey, little buddy. Go ahead and unmute, and then I'll try to get to Dilmo and Jack McCutcheon. I see you guys in their queue. I'll try to get to you both, I promise. But what's going on, Elliot's Burner?
Hey, how's it going, man? We had a guy call it a minute ago talking about Penn State, which brought up, Frank Solich at Nebraska, which was one of the worst, fires in the history of Nebraska football. It was led up to, Bo Pelini getting fired after winning, 9 games every season. Just want to kind of get your take on the current outlook in Nebraska football after, Matt Rule's first season, losing the last 4 games, before becoming bowl eligible and kind of end the season in an abysmal way. And then we have Dylan Raiola, some high profile recruits coming in, Carter Nelson. And then next season we got a tough stretch of 3 games, with Ohio State, UCLA, USC. Is it likely that Nebraska goes into that last stretch of the season 7-0? Just kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I am still bullish on Matt Rule because he always his first season's always the weakest. That anyone who's read about him knows that. I mean, I actually remember when he got good at Temple. I remember when Baylor hired him, kind of laughing a little bit when that first season went pretty disastrously, but then being impressed at where he got them at the end. So to see where they were, I mean, I was in the press box for the opener, the Minnesota game, and I remember watching that game. I'm like, I can't tell it's a classic week 0 game. I'm like, I cannot tell how to read either of these teams. Like, are their defenses that good, or are their offenses that bad? It turns out
Right.
maybe a little bit of both. It's not entirely sure. But then, Nebraska, I thought, did better than expected. And I wonder, it's kind of one of those situations and where a team, you have modest expectations for them and then they start fairly well because obviously, like Colorado was a great example of that. They started so strong and everyone's like, oh my gosh, look at Colorado, look at Dion, he's exceptional, blah, blah, blah. And then we watched them trail off. And although, and obviously Nebraska was on the receiving end of that early on, they were able to kind of to claw over to 5 wins fairly quickly with only that one little loss to Michigan, which was expected. And then, that Michigan State game was where things kind of started to fall apart. I remember that Michigan State game and being shocked when that scoreline came across. All of that said, I think things are trending up. I mean, you pointed it out. I mean, seeing who's coming in, that was that. I mean, getting the quarterback, getting Raiola, that was a great sign for I thought, the state of the program and how healthy it is. Um, the schedule is definitely light at the beginning. I mean, you got UTEP, Colorado, who I think they're not going to get surprised by Colorado, and they're going into Lincoln, and I know that rivalry. I mean, I've said it before. One of my favorite things was going to Nebraska in 2007, and just experiencing what it's like in Lincoln on game day, and then noticing that there's one team they also clearly hate, even though they weren't playing that day, and it was Colorado. So I always tell people, like, they're nice to everybody, but man, they definitely, that's a rivalry if you're not aware of
That's
it.
true, man. That's true.
Yeah. It's not like the respectful rivalry with Oklahoma. It's like, no. They don't like them.
It's different. It's different.
You know, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you got NIU, you got Illinois. I don't know what's going to happen in Illinois. I'm very curious to see how long it's going to take for Bielema to get them to somewhere. And if he can, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana. And then you get, as you said, that gauntlet,
yeah.
Ohio State. UCLA, I'm not sure where to peg them. USC, could be good. Or we could be looking at, man, how does Riley keep messing this up? Who knows? I mean, they're kind of a mystery. Ohio State, I do think, is the scarier one of that group. Frankly, they're probably the toughest game in the schedule next season.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be in Ohio Stadium, and for a lot of reasons, I think Ohio State's going to be certainly a championship contender. Certainly the playoff expectations, they're going to be the tough one. And that one, I think and I don't know, I'd love to know your opinion on this. I mean, if you're a Nebraska fan, is the goal next season just to get over the bowl hump? Maybe get to 7 or 8 wins, rather than necessarily like, okay, this is the year things are going to turn around and it's, we're going to go into the championship game.
I mean, the bowl expectations got to be the minimum, right? I think max it's got to be 8, 9 wins. I think Iowa's a must win. I think UCLA is a must win. Wisconsin's a must win. USC and Ohio State are toss ups. It'd be nice if we had it'd be really nice if we had Ohio State or USC at home. That would be really great. But those 2 away games are going to be brutal, man.
Yeah, no, and I mean, well, the good news is the Coliseum isn't the scariest place to play. I can say this as a USC fan, but also, I mean, gosh, it is exciting to get these games, though. I still can't believe, it's going to be fun for some of these fans to get these visits. I mean, if you're a Big Ten fan, you have an opportunity to go see some of these stadiums. It's going to be exciting, and not just USC, UCLA, but I've been to Autzen, I've been to Husky Stadium. They're phenomenal places as a fan, but. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to be honest. Heading into next season, I would rather play the LA schools than I would the Pacific Northwest schools right now. I mean, again, Washington's a little bit questionable. They're more like the analog to UCLA right now because I just can't tell what's going to show up on that field next season. But Oregon is terrifying. I mean, that's why with Ohio State, I mean, man, they got to go to Autzen. That's not, of all the new programs, that's not the game I would want to have. That's a place where teams that thought they had championship hopes have gone and just been blown up unexpectedly because it is a tough place to play. And Lanning's got them playing at a level that it's going to be really interesting. It's almost going to be like a quasi SEC style team being plopped into the Big Ten. Let's see how they do. And they're totally not where you'd expect them to be from.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, man. I'd much rather have UCLA and USC on the schedule than even Washington and Oregon right now.
Yeah, it's remarkable to think that. Like, who would have ever thought? Like, especially because of how late they came to the game. I mean, like the whole change at the end of the last offseason, that sudden shift suddenly. Oh, by the way, those 2 teams are now coming too. I never would have thought like, okay, now those are the 2 you don't want to play. USC, great. We definitely had higher hopes for how that team was going to do before the season. But my goodness, again, as I've said before, it is such an exciting time. I mean, setting aside the stuff that kind of sucks, like it sucks that we saw the Pac-12 blow up. It sucks that Oregon State and Wazoo are where they are. But my goodness, in terms of just pure, like, I have no idea what's going to happen kind of excitement, next season's going to be phenomenal. Like, who's going to make the final 12? Like, are we going to see teams that, especially with the 12-team playoff, or will we see teams through physical attrition that just aren't the same team by the time they get to the championship game, and we see some kind of really unexpected upset because key people just are gassed or they can't play, or it's absolutely intriguing. I love the lack of ability to
Yeah,
predict
I
what's
mean,
going to
we
happen.
can even see some weird stuff like Ole Miss and Iowa both making the playoff next year. Man, that's gonna be weird.
Oh, I hope so. Can you imagine? I just want to see. Hopefully Iowa is going to have. That would probably assume Iowa gets some more of a competent offense with now in the post Brian Ferentz era. But my goodness, could you imagine like just who they'd be paired up with? Yeah, to see that, and then what kind of G5 team is going to make it. This year was such a weird season for the G5. I can't emphasize that enough. The fact that for Liberty to have gotten in, so much had have gone wrong, and it did. It was like for G5s, it was like their equivalent of the 2007 season because it looked like Air Force was favored or Fresno State or Wyoming. All of those guys kind of clobbered each other. Then all the other teams like SMU and Tulane kind of fell short. And then at one point Memphis even looked like they had a shot. And then all of them fell to the wayside. And the team that had the worst schedule in the preseason managed to do what they could do, and they went through. I mean, the odds of that were so low, and yet it all came to pass, and and Oregon put an end to it. But we saw exactly what we were kind of expecting. But again, that was. I mean, I felt so bad for Liberty because the one team in the New Year's Six that decided to have like all their key players decided to stay and play. Which again, what does that say about Dan Lanning? I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
just absolutely beat them like a drum.
Yeah, it was
like
it was a easy day to make some money. I'll just say that.
Oh, I love it. Well, thanks so much for joining us, man. It was great
Yeah,
talking
I
to you.
appreciate it, man. Thanks for taking my call.
Hey, Dilmo, you've been super patient, man. I just want to say that. What's on your mind?
Thank you. Huge Arizona Wildcats fan. Go Kitty Cats. I just have a question about a sort of a star breakout receiver we're going to see next season. When do you think people are really going to start taking Montana Lamonius Craig seriously? Is he not going to follow his coach to Washington, and be the next Romeo Odunze? And if not, do you see him being the leading receiver in the Big 12? We really need to stop glazing, guys. We need to stop glazing, guys. Like Luther Burden. Come on, Kentucky Wildcats. Oh, I got beat.
With Arizona, with what Brent Brennan's heading into, I mean, Arizona has been such a weird situation. They simply could not afford to pay Jed Fish more money. They just couldn't because they've got this awkward situation. I don't know if it's going to lead to criminal charges, but $240 million they somehow misaccounted for. What does that mean? They never had the money. Somehow, somewhere, somebody budgeted $240 million. Somebody looked at the budget and said, we don't have that money. So that university is in a whole heap of pain right now. And Brent Brennan seems to be at least a guy who can do a lot with a little, but if he can maintain and keep those two guys around, that'd be something else. I don't know. Let's see here. I'm going to slowly start wrapping this up, but I want to let's see here. UF fan 1962. Let me go ahead and let you up here. Sorry about that. Let one last person up here, and then we can slowly start wrapping this up. UF fan 1962, what is going on?
Hey, it's UF fan 1962. I kind of agree. I think Montana Lamonius Craig is going to be an all-star breakout player next season. And
all right, well, that's a good one. So I think on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. This was our CFB Talk 176. I'm Bobak Ha'Eri. It's always good talking to you on Tuesday nights. We do these. It's an opportunity to talk about college football. I'm not sure if next week we'll have quite as much that has happened. Maybe we'll figure out who's the new head coach at San Jose State, South Alabama, and Buffalo. I'm sure you're all antsy to know that, but we'll see what goes on. So on behalf of all of us at RCFB, thanks for listening. Now I'm going to hang up and listen.